Today we're going to learn how to fix a little bit of a shake problem when it comes to the scanner. If you ever notice that you are putting documents on the flat glass and when the print comes out you can see a little shakiness or bumpiness to your prints, then chances are that this carriage that slides along the glass to actually scan the document, chances are that that carriage is probably skipping along its track. That track just needs to be lubricated. Very quick, simple, easy process. So that's what we're going to learn about today.
Copier copying, take 3.
All right, so let's get started. There's only 2 things that you need for this, actually 3 things that you need. I like to use 3-in-1 oil. That's probably the best thing. You don't want to use any sort of spray lubricant, just so you don't get anything on any of the optics that are underneath here that can cause you a lot of problems in the future. And then the other thing you need is a Phillips head screwdriver and your finger. Those are the 3 things that you're going to need for this procedure. And the first thing we're going to do is take off these 2 panels here. And this front panel, I like to take this one off first. It's held on by 3 screws. I'm sorry, it's held on by 2 screws. This one here, and then one over here on the side. Now, occasionally, you might take those 2 off and you still can't get this panel off, and that's usually because of this flat screw right here. This isn't holding the panel on, but it is preventing it from sliding out. So you may have to take that one out as well. Once those screws are off, this should slide right out. This side panel is held on by 4 screws, 1 up here on the top and then 3 along the side. Once that last screw is off, this will just slide right out. And another tool that actually makes this process a little easier is another Phillips head screwdriver, but just the stubby version, because we do have to take off this metal plate in order to get access underneath the glass. So that only helps because in this back corner it can be a little tight. You can do it with a normal size screwdriver, but this just makes it a whole lot easier. So we're going to take these 2 screws off. This plate comes right off. And then now we can take the glass off. It is kind of being held on by a couple tabs over here on the left-hand side, so I always like to pick it up from this side and then kind of slide it back towards me. Okay, now we're down a little bit lower so we can see the track, and I should mention, obviously you need to do this when the machine is off. And the reason I say that is because we're going to have to move this carriage, and we have to be very, very careful that we move it consistently so it's not getting offset in any way. So as we move this carriage just very gently, we're going to move it all the way to the right-hand side. And then that gives us access to the track, which is kind of tucked up underneath here. And you're going to have one on both sides. This is the back, and then also one on the front that we're going to need to lubricate. And if you touch it with your finger, you can kind of feel whether or not there's still some grease on it. This one in particular, I'm not necessarily having a problem that I described, but I'm going to lubricate it anyway, just so the final customer does not have any issues. And the reason we're moving the carriage all the way over to the right-hand side is because this is the area of the track that is not utilized very often. So what we want to do is we want to lubricate this track all the way down here as far as we can go on both sides, being very careful not to touch any of the mirrors in here or any of the glass pieces. And the reason you don't want to do this while the machine is on is because if you move that carriage and then put everything back together again, your scans are not going to come out right because the machine now thinks that the carriage is in a different location even though it's not. So what we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to move this carriage all the way back over to the left. We're going to put everything back together, and then we're going to fire up the machine. That's going to make sure that the carriage is kind of reset in its home position. All right, so we're going to take out the 3-in-1 oil. And you can do this a couple different ways. You can kind of put some on your finger and just rub it, or you can kind of just get in there and squeeze a little bit on. Just do a nice thin bead, and then take your finger and wipe it down. And then we're going to come on the front. Alright, so I have both tracks lubricated. They're nice and smooth now. And so now I'm going to move the carriage again back to the left-hand side, being very careful not to push one side faster than the other. I'm going to just do it real slow, nice and steady. All the way to the home position. And at this point you can kind of take your finger and just do that last little bit of track as well. That's not as important because it's not utilized as much, but why not? Another thing you can do while you're down here, I did mention before that we're going to clean the glass before we put it back on. You also have this slit glass that you can clean. Obviously we'd have to pull this carriage back out, and we can just clean it inside. Don't ever spray any sort of cleaning materials or cleaning solutions inside here, because like I mentioned, all these mirrors and all these pieces of glass, it can drastically affect your print and copy quality if there's any sort of residue or any sort of chemicals on those. So be very, very careful. Just get a soft cloth, spray some Windex on the cloth, and then wipe underneath this slit glass. Alright, so we're going to put the glass back on after we get it cleaned. We're going to put the two panels back